What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Living Matt channel, where I talk to you about how I'm living my American dream. Today I want to open up with you a little bit about my previous marriage and how I failed as a husband. This is a very personal video, but I'm hoping that by sharing some of the things that I did wrong during my marriage, that maybe some of you that are struggling in your own marriage can learn something and either save your marriage, or if you're not ready for marriage, things to talk about before you go into it. In any case, hopefully my mistakes, my opening up to you about the things that I did wrong will help you in some way. If you haven't already seen it, I made another video about things I went through after my divorce. I'll link that up somewhere up over here. I encourage you to watch it as well. All right, so 5 things that I want to share with you about things that I did wrong and why, or things that led to my divorce. Now, honestly, if I were to dissect it all, after a 14-year relationship, there's a lot more than 5 things that I could share with you all. But for now, I'm going to give you 5. Obviously, a divorce, a breakup of any kind, is not a one-sided story. There's 2 sides to the story. I believe that most relationships, when they're relatively healthy, always have 2 sides, and there's always 2 parts that contribute to that relationship. But all I can do is give you my perspective on things that maybe I did wrong, or not maybe, but things that I did wrong. And honestly, just things that made me a bad husband. So the first thing, if we start at the very root of it all, I proposed when I was 19 years old. I had just enlisted into the Marine Corps. I was about to ship off to boot camp. I was dating someone. We'd been dating for about 10 months at the time. And like a lot of young Marines in that situation, I don't know if I felt desperate, if I felt rushed, or if it just seemed like the next logical step. We've been dating. I'm about to go to boot camp, go start my life somewhere else, wherever the Marine Corps sends me. Maybe it just felt like that's what I needed to do instead of breaking up. But what I do know is that looking back on it, I was not ready to be married. I hadn't experienced adulthood yet. I didn't really know what marriage entailed because, unfortunately, growing up, I hadn't really seen that in my own family. So there were a lot of things that just did not have me fully prepared to enter marriage at that stage. Now, some of you might say, hey, I got married at 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, and I'm happily married. Or I have a friend who got married at 17, 18 years old, and they're happily married 30 years later. I know that happens. I have people in my own family who got married very young, who 20 plus years later are still married. So I know that's possible. However, I also realize that's the exception to the rule. It's more normal for young people to end up like me and end up divorced. Now, that's not a good thing, obviously. I'm not saying that's what should happen. I'm just saying most of us that get young are not ready for marriage. So that was the first mistake that I made. Second mistake that I made was ignoring red flags. So, like I said, I proposed before I went off to boot camp. While I was there, my fiance during the moment, I believe maybe she wasn't ready either. And so she had another relationship. And this is not me dogging on her by any means. Like me, she was very young. Probably wasn't ready for marriage either. But at the moment, at the time, neither one of us really understood, I guess, the magnitude of it all. And I guess in a way we did, and that's why we were doing the things that we were doing, like rushing and all these things. But at the same time, we were not slowing down to acknowledge the magnitude of it all. And what an impact this decision was going to have on our lives, especially at that age. We started to have problems very early on in our marriage. We would fight over simple things. We didn't really agree on some things. But we never really worked to resolve those things. So we a lot of red flags along the way. We'd break up, get back together, break up, get back together. And we never really resolved those things. These are all red flags that I should have acknowledged and maybe said, hey, we need counseling, or we need to talk or something. But no, I just kept moving forward. And because I did that, the third mistake that I made is that because I was unhappy, because I didn't feel ready for marriage, because being committed to someone else was just something that was beyond me at the time, I had an affair. I believe it was maybe the third or fourth year of our marriage, somewhere around there. I had an affair, and she found out about it. And I remember thinking, well, our marriage isn't going anywhere, so what's the big deal? So in other words, I was trying to justify it to myself. I was trying to find a way to make it seem like this is okay. I'm not a bad person. What I did is not this terrible thing. But in retrospect, yes, it is a terrible thing. Regardless of whatever issues we had, regardless of any bad stuff going on, I violated a very sacred trust. It's one thing to say, maybe she had a very short relationship with someone else when we were engaged. For one, we were engaged. For two, we were 19 years old. I feel like it's a much bigger deal to be married like we were, and now in our early 20s, and for me to have an affair. So I say that because I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to dog on my ex or anything like that, and say she did this thing that's so bad, but I didn't. No, that's not the case at all. I had an affair. I cheated on my wife. Now, this was before our son was born, but regardless, it's something that should, and most times, breaks up a marriage. But again, we were not working our issues out. I was not putting in the effort to work our issues out. I was unhappy, and so I was doing things that I shouldn't be doing instead of working on fixing the relationship. So that was a big mistake that I had. Fast forward a little bit, we end up having a child. And what we did, and this was unconscious, neither one of us really planned this, but we ended up making our child the center of our marriage. What I mean by that is things didn't necessarily get better between us. It's not like all of a sudden we jived and everything was perfect and harmonious. But because we both had this child that we loved, we were both very devoted to this child, we made him the center of our relationship, kind of like the foundation that kept us going forward. And that's not healthy for a relationship, and it's not fair to the child. At the time, I remember thinking, we have to stay together for him. This is good for him. And I remember actually reading a book. I wish I remembered the name off the top of my head, but I remember reading a book where they followed these marriages for something like 25 years. It's a longitudinal study. They followed these marriages or relationships for 25 years to try and see the effect of children that went through divorce or those that didn't. And according to this longitudinal study, the research said, now could be wrong, but the research in this book said that children, if they are in a healthy environment, are better off when there's two parents. Now let me explain that a little bit. What they're trying to say is the parents don't necessarily have to have the perfect relationship where they love each other and they're devoted to one another and all that stuff, right? What we think of as a happy marriage. As long as they're good to each other, they respect each other, they treat each other well, there's no physical violence, no emotional violence, none of that stuff. If there's none of that, anything that you can put under violence or any of those things, any kind of harm to the spouse or the child is better off in a two-parent home. And I remember reading that book. That hit me hard because I was thinking, how can I leave this relationship? How can we leave each other when we have a child who obviously is going to benefit from having two parents? So for a long time, we kind of used that as an excuse to keep it going, even though we were both unhappy. It wasn't that I wasn't happy or she was happy. We were both unhappy because we were not being there for each other the way that we should be. And along those lines, the fifth mistake that I made is that I saw that she was unhappy. I was unhappy, but I wasn't taking proactive action to do something about it. We went to counseling a couple of times, but we never really kept it going for very long. And when we did, we wouldn't take the lessons learned from the counseling session home to keep it going and grow it and work on it. We just kind of kept going through the motions, day after day, month after month, year after year, till we were married 13 years. And sure, I could say, well, she didn't either. But again, like I said, a relationship is a two-way street, and somebody has to take the first step. And I never took that first step. Maybe if I had, maybe things could have been better. But I never did. And you can't say you're a good spouse, husband, wife, whatever, significant other, if you're not doing your part, if you're not giving your very best, if you're not putting forth 100% effort to make a relationship work. And this is not to say that you should give 100% of the time, 100% of yourself all the time, and your partner gives nothing. No, I believe there should be an equal balance. However, there may be times when a relationship is broken, and it's going to require one person to step up and put in a little bit more work than the other to try to get them back in balance. And that happens, especially if you're in a long committed relationship. There's going to be those ebbs and flows where things happen, where you're going to fight. You're going to have disagreements about the children, careers, moving to different places, whatever. There's going to be issues. And when those issues happen, somebody has to be the bigger person to step up, swallow their pride, and take some proactive action to fix the situation. I never did that. In my own, I don't really complain too much about it outwardly, but in my own head, I did. I just kind of had this idea of, things are bad, just got to keep pushing. I'm not happy, just got to keep pushing. I know she's not happy, she'll be all right, we'll get through it. But obviously, we didn't get through it. We ended up divorced. And that's why I'm making this video now. One, to tell you or to share with you some of the things that I did wrong in that relationship, how I contributed to the end of our relationship. But at the same time, I don't want to just tell you what I did bad. I'd like to try to give you 5 lessons that I learned from making those mistakes. The first lesson is bad news doesn't get better with age. This is something that we say in the Marine Corps a lot, but it really applies to so much of life in general. When something bad happens and you hold on to that, whether it's an emotion, getting fired from work, having an argument with somebody, whatever happens that's bad, if you have somebody in your life that you can share that with, you should, especially if it concerns them or affects them in any way. Because the longer you wait to pass on that information, the worse it's going to be. The bigger of an impact you're going to have on that person, especially when we're talking about something like marriage and your relationship with that person. When something bad happens, you need to talk about it. You need to resolve it. The sooner the better. That's my opinion. The other thing is, I've come to appreciate just how freaking important communication is. Open, honest, and respectful communication. It's not enough to just always be willing to talk. You have to be open, meaning listen to the other person, try to understand their point of view. It has to be honest, so don't sugarcoat things. I'm not saying, be a butthole and tell your significant other, well, you jack this up, you jack that up. No, you want to be honest, but you want to be tactful. You want to consider the other person's emotions. And you have to be respectful, because the moment you start treating the other person with disrespect is the moment you start to tear away at the fabric of the love that's uniting you. You have to always respect each other. No matter how hard things get, no matter how hard the conversation gets, you have to respect each other. But you gotta talk. That if there's one thing that I know for a fact, I failed at in my previous relationship, was the communication. So that's a big one. The other thing that I will say is, or the third lesson I took away is, if one person is unhappy in the relationship, it can tear away the marriage. It's not enough for one person to be doing great and happy and going about their life. Both people have to be happy. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you are responsible or wholly responsible for the happiness of your partner. I think we each bear, I would say, the majority of responsibility for our own happiness. I can't look for a relationship hoping that they'll fill me, that they'll complete me, that they'll fill this void inside of me and all of a sudden I'll be happy. No, I have to be happy with myself. At the same time, we can't impact the happiness of someone else. So if someone is already happy and we're not, we're depressed, we're lonely, whatever the case may be, we can bring that person down. So a good person may not necessarily bring someone else up, but a bad person can bring someone else down. The same goes with happiness. A happy person may not necessarily bring someone else up to be happy, but an unhappy person can bring a happy person down. And it's important to recognize and understand these things, because if your partner is unhappy and you don't acknowledge it, things are going to get worse and it can tear you apart. But if you recognize it, then maybe you can take action to do something about it. Maybe you can't yourself, depending on the situation. Maybe you need counseling. Maybe your partner needs counseling. Maybe they need a career change. Maybe they need support at home. Maybe they need help with the kids, whatever the case may be. But you have to acknowledge, you have to accept it, and you have to try to find a way to make sure that your partner is happy. And if you're the one that's unhappy, then you need to try to find a way to make yourself happy. If you need help doing that, ask for that help. Regardless of who it is in the dynamic that's unhappy, if that's not fixed, it can start to tear you apart. Little by little, you wouldn't even notice it, but it can tear you apart. And that's why the fourth thing that I learned is the importance of counseling. Individual counseling, couples counseling, family counseling, counseling of any kind. Counseling, I don't even know. Whatever it is that you need, counseling can help. Now, I'm not saying every counselor out there in the world is going to give you the answers, so that it's going to be the answer to all your problems, but it can be one of the tools that you utilize to help your relationship. Like I said earlier, my spouse and I used it, but we weren't consistent with it. We didn't really follow through with it. And if you don't legitimately give yourself to this counselor, if you don't actually go in with the idea that, hey, this is something that's beneficial for me, it's not really going to do anything for you. You have to believe in it. You have to trust the process, and you have to go through the process. You have to follow through on that process. All right, the last thing that I want to leave you with, and this one might be controversial, so if you don't agree, I would love for you to drop a comment in the comment section, because I really want to know what people think out there. But this is something that I've thought about for years, and it's kind of what I'm about to tell you is kind of what I've come up with, all right, as I've thought about this. And it revolves around children. If you don't have children, maybe this doesn't apply to you. But I try to think about now, I've got 2 teenage kids. What do I want to teach them about relationships? What is it that I'm trying to exemplify through my own life, through my own actions about relationships? Because here's the thing, a lot of us learn how to be in a relationship by watching our parents, maybe uncles, aunts, other adults in our life. As we're growing up, we see these adult relationships, and they provide the first example for us of what a healthy and positive relationship is. So I'm trying to do that for them. And the one thing that I think about now, it was extremely difficult for me to accept that my son, my oldest son, would grow up without both of his biological parents together. That was tough. For a long time, it kept me down. I was going through these waves of depression, just thinking about, I live far away from my son, he doesn't have both of his parents, how is this going to affect him, so on and so forth. Now, I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't have negative impact. I think, if possible, if 2 people love each other and they can make a relationship work, I think they should do everything they can to make it work, because I do believe a child has the potential to do better in life if they have both parents together. However, I've also come to believe that if 2 people are not happy together, they should not stay together for the kids. And the reason for that is because as I think about my own 2 kids, I don't want them to be in a marriage, in a long-term committed relationship in which they are unhappy solely for the purpose of keeping their kid in a 2-parent home. What I would much rather them do is find a solution, find a path where my son and their partner can continue to co-parent, can continue to love and support their child together throughout their lives, and show them that, hey, our relationship didn't work, but we still love you as a parent. We are still here for you as a parent. You can always count and rely on us to be here for you, to love you, to support you, blah, 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 blah. In my opinion, that's a much better lesson that I intend to pass on to them. They need to care about themselves just as much as they care about those around them. I don't want them to sacrifice their entire lives for a partner or for their children, because and again, that comes off a little weird. Even as I'm saying it, I'm not sure if I'm portraying my messages right. But I want them to value themselves just as much as they value others. Hopefully, you understand what I'm saying. But again, if you don't, if you have some other ideas, drop it in the comment section. I want to know what you. I really want to know what you think, because this is something that just twirls around in my head over and over again, and I've been grappling with it for years. All right, guys. Hopefully you liked this video. If you did, hit that like button so the YouTube algorithm pushes it out there. If you want to see more, click that subscribe button so you know when I upload the next video. Otherwise, see you in the next video. Deuces.